Okay, so imagine you're Plato. Yeah, the Plato. Ancient Greek philosopher, student of Socrates, basically the original guy who said, "Let me tell you about this crazy thing I heard." And one day around 360 BCE, you start writing about this legendary civilization that was super advanced, incredibly wealthy, and then just vanished, disappeared in a single day and night of catastrophe, swallowed by the sea, gone forever. You call it Atlantis. Flash forward 2,400 years, and people are still arguing about whether you were describing a real place or just making stuff up to prove a philosophical point. But here's where it gets wild. There's this lost kingdom in southern Spain called Tartessos that checks almost every box on Plato's Atlantis description. Wealthy beyond imagination? Check. Advanced civilization? Check. Mysteriously vanished? Oh, absolutely check. And the kicker? It was literally buried under mud and forgotten for thousands of years until archaeologists started piecing together what might be the most epic "I told you so" in ancient history. Welcome to Mystique History, where today we're diving into Tartessos, the lost kingdom that might just prove Atlantis wasn't a myth after all, or at least it wasn't completely made up. Buckle up, because this one's got treasure, natural disasters, and enough mysterious disappearances to make the Bermuda Triangle jealous. Let's set the stage. We're talking about the area around the Guadalquivir River in southern Spain, near modern-day Cádiz and Huelva. This region, around 1000 BCE to 500 BCE, was home to a civilization called Tartessos, and when I say this place was loaded, I mean loaded. We're talking gold, silver, tin, bronze. These people were basically swimming in precious metals like Scrooge McDuck, except real and probably with better safety protocols. The ancient writers who mentioned Tartessos describe it like it was the ancient world's version of Dubai. Massive wealth, incredible trade connections, sophisticated culture, and resources that made everyone else in the Mediterranean absolutely green with envy. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote about a Greek trader named Kolaios, who accidentally ended up in Tartessos around 638 BCE after getting blown off course. This guy came back with so much silver that he made a massive bronze anchor just to show off his wealth. That's like winning the lottery, and instead of buying a yacht, you build a solid gold parking meter just because you can. The Bible even mentions Tartessos, except they call it Tarshish. It's described as this distant land of incredible riches, a place where King Solomon sent ships to bring back gold, silver, and exotic goods. The ancient equivalent of, "Yeah, we ship from Tarshish," was basically saying, "We've got the premium stuff, the good goods, straight from the source." But here's the thing that makes Tartessos so fascinating and so frustrating. Despite all these ancient references, despite all the descriptions of this massively wealthy and important civilization, we can't find it. Well, we couldn't find it. Past tense. Because the reason Tartessos vanished is almost as interesting as the civilization itself. So what happened? Where did this entire kingdom go? The answer is both simple and absolutely wild. It got buried. Under mud. Lots and lots of mud. And silt. And sediment. Basically, Mother Nature looked at Tartessos and said, "You know what would be funny? If I just buried this," and then proceeded to do exactly that over the course of several centuries. The Guadalquivir River, which was the lifeblood of Tartessos, started changing its course. Flooding became more frequent. Sediment built up, the coastline shifted, and slowly but surely all the major cities and ports of Tartessos got buried under layers and layers of river deposits. It's like the world's slowest magic trick, except instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, you're making an entire civilization disappear under geological processes. Now, this wasn't just one big catastrophic flood, although there were definitely some major flooding events. It was more like death by 1,000 cuts, except the cuts are made of mud and take several hundred years. The sea level was changing, the river delta was expanding, and everything that made Tartessos important, the ports, the trade routes, the cities, all of it gradually became inaccessible and eventually just got swallowed by the landscape. By around 500 BCE, Tartessos as a major power had pretty much vanished from history. The cities were abandoned or buried, trade routes shifted elsewhere, and within a few generations, people started treating Tartessos like a legend rather than a real place. It became the ancient world's version of "my uncle works at Nintendo." Everyone had heard stories, but nobody could actually prove it existed. Fast forward to the 20th century, and archaeologists start getting curious. All these ancient sources mention Tartessos. The location roughly makes sense. But where's the physical evidence? Where are the ruins, the artifacts, the proof that this wasn't just ancient writers hyping up some random Spanish villages? Here's the problem. Finding archaeological evidence under meters and meters of river sediment is hard. It's not like you can just start digging random holes in southern Spain hoping to find ancient treasure. Well, you can, but the Spanish government tends to frown upon that sort of thing. You need ground-penetrating radar, you need careful surveying, you need to study the ancient geography and figure out where the coastline and river channels would have been 3,000 years ago. It's like trying to find your car keys, except your car keys are an entire civilization, and someone buried them under a completely different landscape than the one you're currently looking at. Oh, and you only have vague descriptions from ancient dude bros who might have been exaggerating. But archaeologists are persistent, and starting in the 1920s they began finding things: stone inscriptions, pottery, bronze artifacts, gold jewelry, evidence of sophisticated metalworking. Proof that yes, there was definitely a major civilization here, and yes, it was wealthy, and yes, it mysteriously vanished. One of the most significant discoveries was something called the Treasure of El Carambolo, found in 1958 near Seville. A construction worker, shout out to construction workers, apparently they're archaeology's MVPs, was digging and found this absolutely stunning collection of gold jewelry. 21 pieces of pure gold, elaborately decorated, weighing over 6 pounds total. The craftsmanship was incredible, featuring intricate geometric patterns and designs that showed serious artistic sophistication. This wasn't some random farmer who got lucky panning for gold. This was royal-level wealth, the kind of stuff that makes museum curators hyperventilate with excitement. And it proved that Tartessos wasn't just legend. It was real, it was wealthy, and it had the artistic and technical skills to create absolutely breathtaking works of art. Now let's talk about the Atlantis connection, because this is where things get really interesting. Plato's description of Atlantis, written in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, describes a powerful civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is the ancient name for the Strait of Gibraltar. You know, the narrow passage between Spain and Morocco, the exact area where Tartessos existed. Coincidence? Maybe. But wait, there's more. Plato describes Atlantis as being located on a coastal plain surrounded by mountains, with a great river running through it. Tartessos, coastal plain along the Guadalquivir River, surrounded by mountains. Check. Atlantis was described as having abundant precious metals, particularly a mysterious metal called orichalcum. Tartessos was famous throughout the ancient world for its gold, silver, and bronze. The region had some of the richest metal deposits in the Mediterranean. Check. Atlantis was a major naval and trading power. Tartessos controlled crucial trade routes and was known for its ships and maritime commerce. Check. And here's the kicker. Atlantis was destroyed by floods and earthquakes and sank into the sea in a single day and night. While Tartessos didn't sink quite that dramatically, it was destroyed by flooding and geological changes that made it disappear from history. Close enough to make you wonder, right? Some researchers have argued that Plato's story of Atlantis was based on garbled accounts of Tartessos that had reached Greece. The details got exaggerated over time, the timeline got compressed from centuries into a single catastrophic event, and boom, you've got the Atlantis myth. It's like the ancient version of a game of telephone, except instead of purple monkey dishwasher, you get advanced civilization destroyed by the gods. But here's where I need to pump the brakes a little bit, because not everyone agrees with the Tartessos Atlantis theory. Plenty of archaeologists and historians think it's a stretch. For one thing, Plato describes Atlantis as being 9,000 years old before his time, which would place it around 9,500 BCE. Tartessos didn't exist until around 1000 BCE. That's an 8,000-year discrepancy, which is significant. Also, Plato was pretty clear that Atlantis was an island. Tartessos was on the mainland even if parts of it were surrounded by water from the river delta, and Plato's descriptions include some pretty fantastical elements. Concentric rings of water and land, elephants, a massive plain that was geometrically perfect, details that don't really match Tartessos at all. The counter-argument is that Plato was writing a philosophical allegory, not a history textbook. He needed to make Atlantis impressive and otherworldly to make his point about hubris and divine punishment. So he took a real civilization that had disappeared, maybe Tartessos, maybe somewhere else, and cranked up the details to 11. It's like if someone 2,000 years from now reads a Marvel comic and tries to figure out if New York City was real, based on whether Spider-Man actually existed. Regardless of whether Tartessos was Atlantis, the fact remains that it's a genuinely mysterious lost civilization with a fascinating story. Even without the Atlantis connection, Tartessos is worth studying just for what it tells us about ancient trade, culture, and how quickly civilizations can vanish. Let's talk about what made Tartessos so wealthy in the first place, because understanding their economy helps explain why everyone wanted to trade with them and why their disappearance was such a big deal. The region of southern Spain where Tartessos existed sits on top of what's called the Iberian Pyrite Belt. Sounds technical, but basically it means the ground is absolutely loaded with metal deposits: gold, silver, copper, tin, lead, you name it, they had it. And in the Bronze Age and early Iron Age, these metals were like oil in the modern world. Everybody needed them. Bronze, which is copper and tin mixed together, was the material used for everything from weapons to tools to jewelry. Having easy access to both copper and tin in the same region was like winning the geological lottery. The people of Tartessos weren't just mining this stuff and selling raw materials either. They were sophisticated metal workers who created finished products. They made bronze weapons, gold jewelry, silver vessels, decorative items. Basically anything you could make from metal, they made it, and they made it well. The El Carambolo treasure I mentioned earlier. That's not the work of amateurs. That's master craftsmen who'd spent generations perfecting their techniques. They traded with the Phoenicians, who were the major maritime traders of the time. The Phoenicians would sail all the way from the eastern Mediterranean, from cities like Tyre and Sidon in modern-day Lebanon, to Tartessos to get metals. That's like sailing from New York to Los Angeles, except it's 800 BCE, and your GPS is literally just looking at the stars and hoping for the best. The Phoenicians liked Tartessos so much, they established a permanent trading post nearby, which eventually became the city of Gadir, modern-day Cadiz. This city is still inhabited today, making it one of the oldest continuously occupied cities in Western Europe. The Phoenicians basically set up shop right next to their best supplier and said, yeah, we're staying here. Now, we don't know a ton about Tartessian culture beyond their metalworking and trade because, most of the evidence is buried under mud. But from what we've pieced together through archaeology and ancient accounts, They seem to have been a hybrid culture that blended indigenous Iberian traditions with influences from Phoenician and Greek traders. They had their own writing system, called the Tartessian script, which is one of the oldest writing systems in the Iberian Peninsula. Here's the frustrating part. We've found inscriptions, but we can barely read them. It's like finding someone's diary from 3,000 years ago, except it's written in a language nobody speaks anymore, and we can only make out like every fifth word. Linguists have been working on deciphering Tartessian for decades with limited success. It's probably related to the Iberian languages, but the jury's still out. They worship their own gods, though they seemed pretty chill about adopting new deities from their trading partners. When you're doing business with everyone from Phoenicians to Greeks to local tribes, religious tolerance is just good economic policy. Don't offend your customers' gods. It's bad for business. They had kings or chieftains, though we don't know much about their political structure. Ancient sources mention kings of Tartessos by name, like Arganthonios, who supposedly ruled for 80 years and lived to be 120. Now, ancient people had a tendency to exaggerate lifespans like we exaggerate fish sizes, so maybe take that with a grain of salt. But the point is, they had centralized leadership and enough political organization to maintain a major trading empire. Here's something that doesn't get enough attention. The environmental changes that buried Tartessos weren't just about flooding. The entire landscape of southern Spain has changed dramatically over the past 3,000 years. What used to be a large bay or gulf called the Lacus Ligustinus by the Romans has completely filled in with sediment and turned into marshland and plains. Imagine if the entire San Francisco Bay just filled in with mud over 1,000 years and became flat land. All those cities and ports that relied on the bay, buried or landlocked. That's essentially what happened to Tartessos. The geography changed so much that even if you had a time machine and knew exactly where a Tartessian city was supposed to be, you'd arrive and see a completely different landscape. This makes archaeology incredibly challenging. You're not just looking for ruins, you're looking for ruins under modern towns, agricultural fields and wetlands, buried under meters of sediment, in an area where the rivers have changed course multiple times. It's like trying to find a specific Lego brick in a swimming pool filled with pudding, except the pudding is hardened mud, and the Lego brick is an ancient city. Despite these challenges, archaeologists have made significant progress. Sites like Cancho Roano, a Tartessian sanctuary complex in Extremadura, have given us incredible insights. It's this elaborate building with multiple rooms, courtyards, and a sophisticated water management system. The site was deliberately buried and sealed around 400 BCE, probably as part of a ritual closure. Thanks to this intentional burial, it was remarkably well preserved, giving us a snapshot of late Tartessian culture. They found evidence of animal offerings, luxury goods, imported pottery from Greece and Phoenicia, and enough artifacts to keep archaeologists busy for decades. It's like someone decided to create a perfect time capsule of their civilization, except they didn't leave a note saying open in 3,000 years. The question that keeps researchers up at night is, what exactly caused Tartessos to collapse? We know the general answer: environmental changes and flooding. But was there a specific catastrophic event? Was it gradual decline? Did political factors play a role? Some theories suggest that the rise of Carthage, the Phoenician colony in North Africa, disrupted Tartessian trade routes. Carthage became increasingly powerful and may have monopolized Mediterranean trade, cutting Tartessos out of the loop. When your entire economy is based on exporting metals and suddenly your trade partners aren't showing up anymore, that's going to be a problem. Others point to evidence of earthquakes and tsunamis in the region. The Iberian Peninsula sits near the boundary of the African and Eurasian tectonic plates. The massive Lisbon earthquake of 1755 CE, which was followed by a devastating tsunami, prove that this area is definitely capable of producing catastrophic seismic events. Could a similar event around 500 BCE have dealt Tartessos a devastating blow? Maybe. We don't have definitive proof, but it's on the table. There's also the gradual environmental change theory, which is probably the most historically supported. The river systems changed, the coastline shifted, marshlands expanded, and over several generations, the core of Tartessian territory just became less and less viable for habitation and trade. People moved elsewhere, cities were abandoned, and nature reclaimed everything. It's the slow-motion disaster scenario, which is somehow even more eerie than a single catastrophic event. Imagine watching your hometown slowly become uninhabitable over your lifetime. The floods get worse each year. The main port starts silting up. Trade ships can't access it as easily. Your grandparents talk about how things used to be, but you've never seen it that way. Eventually, your generation decides to pack up and leave, and within a few more generations, nobody even remembers exactly where everything was. That's probably closer to what actually happened with Tartessos. Modern technology has given archaeologists new tools to search for Tartessos. Ground-penetrating radar can detect structures buried under sediment without digging. Satellite imagery can reveal subtle variations in the landscape that might indicate buried ruins. LiDAR technology can map terrain with incredible precision, showing features invisible to the naked eye. In 2011, a team of researchers claimed they'd found evidence of a massive ancient city in the marshlands of Doñana National Park, north of Cádiz, using satellite imagery and ground surveys. They suggested this could be a major Tartessian city, possibly even the main capital. The site showed evidence of a multi-ringed settlement structure which, if you remember Plato's description of Atlantis, is very interesting. Now, the archaeological community is divided on this. Some think it's a significant discovery that could revolutionize our understanding of Tartessos. Others think it's overreaching based on limited evidence, and that the structures could be natural geological formations or later Roman construction. Science moves slowly, and until extensive excavation happens, we won't know for sure. But the possibility is tantalizing. The problem is that Doñana National Park is a protected wetland, home to endangered species and important ecosystems. You can't just roll up with excavators and start digging up a national park because you think there might be ancient ruins under it. So the potential evidence sits there under the mud, waiting for technology to improve or for someone to figure out a non-invasive way to confirm what's down there. It's archaeology's ultimate tease. We think we found something huge, but we can't actually check yet, so just hold on for a few more years, maybe decades, and we'll get back to you. Here's what we know for certain about Tartessos. It existed, it was wealthy, it was culturally sophisticated, it traded extensively throughout the Mediterranean, and it vanished from history around 500 BCE. Everything else is varying degrees of educated guessing, mixed with archaeological evidence and ancient accounts that may or may not be exaggerated. Was it Atlantis? Probably not in the literal sense that Plato described, but could it have inspired the Atlantis story? Could accounts of Tartessos's wealth and disappearance have reached Plato through Egyptian sources, gotten embellished and mixed with other traditions, and emerged as the Atlantis myth? That's actually pretty plausible. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Plato was writing philosophy, not history. He needed a cautionary tale about hubris and divine punishment, so he created Atlantis. But like most good fiction, he probably drew on real elements, stories he'd heard, places that had really existed, events that had actually happened, and wove them together into something new. Tartessos could easily be one of those real elements, a civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, fabulously wealthy, mysteriously vanished. It fits too well to be completely coincidental. But Plato wasn't writing a documentary about Tartessos. He was making a point about Athens and Sparta and the nature of ideal societies. The historical accuracy of his source material was probably the least of his concerns. So what's the takeaway here? What does Tartessos teach us beyond, hey, cool lost civilization? I think it's a reminder of how fragile even the most powerful civilizations can be. Tartessos had everything going for it. Natural resources, trade connections, skilled craftsmen, strategic location. But environmental changes and shifting economic patterns were enough to erase it from history. It also shows us how much of human history we've lost. Tartessos was a major power for 500 years, and we know so little about it that researchers are still debating basic facts. How many other civilizations have vanished so completely that we don't even know they existed? How many stories have been buried under mud, or sand, or jungle, or ocean, waiting for some lucky construction worker or curious archaeologist to stumble upon them? And it reminds us that nature doesn't care about your GDP. The Guadalquivir River didn't check Tartessos' quarterly earnings before deciding to change course and bury everything under sediment. Climate change, geological processes, natural disasters. They happen whether you're ready or not, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're the dominant power in your region or a struggling village. The people of Tartessos probably saw the changes coming. The floods getting worse, the ports silting up, the marshlands expanding. But what were they supposed to do? You can't negotiate with a river. You can't tell tectonic plates to chill out. Sometimes the best you can do is adapt, move, and hope your story survives in some form. And you know what? It did. Not perfectly, not completely. But Tartessos survived as legend, as scattered artifacts, as gold treasures in museums, as mysterious inscriptions we're still trying to read, and maybe, just maybe, as the inspiration for history's most famous lost civilization. If you're ever in southern Spain, the museums in Seville, Huelva, and Cádiz all have Tartessian artifacts on display. The El Carambolo treasure is in Seville, and let me tell you, seeing that gold work in person is absolutely worth the trip. It's one thing to see pictures. It's another thing to stand in front of 3,000-year-old craftsmanship and realize that the people who made this had skills that would impress modern jewelers. The Doñana National Park, where researchers think a major Tartessian city might be buried, is also worth visiting just for its natural beauty. Watching wetland birds while standing on top of a potential lost civilization is a pretty unique experience. Just don't start digging, seriously. The rangers will stop you and you'll deserve it. And if you're really into ancient mysteries, you can visit Cancho Roano, the preserved sanctuary site. It's in the middle of nowhere in Extremadura, but that's kind of the point. Standing in those ancient rooms, seeing the evidence of ritual practices from 2,500 years ago, it connects you to these people in a way that's hard to describe. They're not just names in books or artifacts in cases anymore. They're real people who lived, worked, worshipped, and eventually vanished, leaving us to piece together their story. So here we are at the end of our dive into Tartessos, the wealthy kingdom that got buried under mud and might have inspired the greatest mystery of the ancient world. Whether you believe the Atlantis connection or not, you've got to admit, it's a pretty compelling story. Advanced civilization? Check. Mysterious disappearance? Check. Lost to the ages until archaeologists started putting the pieces together? Big check. The truth is, we're still discovering Tartessos. Every few years, new excavations reveal more artifacts, more evidence, more pieces of the puzzle. The full story is still buried out there under the marshlands and rivers of southern Spain, waiting for the right technology or the right discovery to bring it to light. And that's what makes it so exciting. This isn't ancient history that's all figured out and boring. This is an active mystery, a civilization we're still learning about, a story that's being written right now by researchers working to uncover the truth. We're living in the time period where Tartessos might go from legendary, maybe real kingdom to well-documented ancient civilization with its own Wikipedia page and everything. If you enjoyed this journey through ancient Spain and mythical Atlantis with Mystique history, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button. Think of it as supporting more stories about civilizations that vanished so thoroughly that people thought they were made up. And drop a comment. Do you think Tartessos was the real Atlantis? Or is Plato just trolling us from 2,400 years in the past? Because honestly, both options are totally plausible. Here's something to think about as you go about your day. What from our civilization will survive 3,000 years from now? What will future archaeologists find buried under layers of sediment and changed landscapes? Will they piece together our story correctly, or will they think we were way more or way less impressive than we actually were? The mud swallowed Tartessos, but it couldn't erase it completely. And that's pretty inspiring when you think about it. No matter how thoroughly something disappears, traces remain. Stories survive. Gold treasures get found by construction workers. And eventually, someone curious enough and persistent enough will dig up the truth. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, sometimes the best mysteries are the ones we're still solving.